Carter Sullivan slammed his palm against the conference table, sending a pile of paperwork scattering across the glossy surface. "We're not leaving until we finish this," he barked, his voice full of the kind of authority that made grown executives squirm. It was nearing midnight, and the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sullivan Tower's top floor showed a glittering Manhattan skyline, but inside, the tension was thick. Carter loosened his tie, running a hand through his dark hair. His team looked exhausted, and honestly, he wasn't far behind. His stomach growled loudly, earning a few tired chuckles from around the room. "Fine," Carter said, pushing back from the table. "I'll order food. Nobody's dying on me tonight." He pulled out his phone, found the highest-rated pizza place still open, and placed a massive order. He didn't bother asking people what they wanted. At this point, they'd eat just about anything. Exactly 30 minutes later, the elevator dinged. Carter, halfway through marking up a contract, barely glanced up when a voice called out, "Pizza delivery for." A very stressed-out office. The voice was light, teasing. Not the bored tone he expected at this hour. He looked up and the breath slammed right out of his lungs. Standing there, holding 3 giant pizza boxes stacked in her arms, was a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. She had long, messy blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail, a worn leather jacket over her delivery uniform, and bright blue eyes that lit up the dim office like fireworks. Her name tag read Jessa Walters. "Where do you want these?" she asked, shifting the boxes slightly. Carter stood up so fast his chair almost toppled behind him. Here. Right here's good." Jessa grinned and set the boxes down on the table. Her hands brushed against his for the quickest second, sending an electric jolt through him. "You're a lifesaver," Carter said, his voice rougher than he intended. She laughed, a sound that somehow made the entire tense office feel a little lighter. "Just doing my job, but hey, if you guys don't finish whatever corporate drama you're dealing with, at least you won't starve." A few people chuckled, but Carter couldn't take his eyes off her. There was something about the way she looked at him like he was just a guy, not Carter Sullivan, CEO of a billion-dollar company. "Wait," he said as she turned to leave. "You got a minute?" Jessa raised an eyebrow. "Depends." "Is this where you tell me you're secretly a vampire and need me to stay forever?" Carter laughed, the sound surprising even himself. "No, you want a slice. You did all the hard work getting it here." Jessa hesitated, glancing at the elevator, then back at him. "I'm technically on the clock, but screw it, one slice." Carter handed her a plate, ignoring the way his team exchanged wide-eyed glances. He didn't care. For the first time in months, he felt awake, really awake. "So," Jessa said, sitting casually on the edge of the conference table, "what's got you guys working the graveyard shift?" Carter leaned against a chair, arms crossed, watching her with open fascination. "Merger deal. Huge one, make or break kind of thing." She took a bite of pizza, chewing thoughtfully. "Sounds intense, is it worth it?" He blinked. "What? All the late nights, the stress, is it actually worth it?" Nobody ever asked him that, not like that, not without an agenda. "I don't know anymore," he admitted before he could stop himself. Jessa smiled, a little softer this time. "Maybe you just need a different kind of win tonight." The way she said it like she was offering him something he didn't even know he needed hit him square in the chest. "You're right," Carter said, voice low. "Maybe I do." She laughed again, standing up and brushing imaginary crumbs off her jeans. "Well, good luck, Mr. CEO, and thanks for the pizza invite." "Wait," he said again, more desperate than he should have sounded. How about dinner, real dinner, when you're off work?" Jessa blinked, genuinely surprised. "You're asking me out, after I just delivered you greasy pizza?" He smiled crookedly. "Best delivery I've ever gotten." She studied him for a long moment, like she was trying to figure out if he was serious. Then she pulled a pen from her jacket and scribbled something on a napkin before handing it to him. "My number. Call me when you're ready for something better than pepperoni," she said, flashing him one last grin before disappearing into the elevator. Carter stared at the napkin like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Boss," one of his executives whispered. "You okay?" "Better than okay," Carter murmured, tucking the napkin safely into his jacket pocket. "Way better." He didn't know it yet, but that night he ordered pizza at midnight just to survive another brutal work emergency was about to change everything. Because Jessa Walters wasn't just a pizza girl with a quick smile and a smart mouth. She was about to steal his heart. 2 days passed before Carter found the courage to call her. It wasn't fear of rejection that made him hesitate. It was the startling realization that he didn't want this to be casual. He wanted to do it right. He waited until after his meetings wrapped for the day, standing by the window of his penthouse, the city sprawling endlessly below. He dialed the number on the napkin, listening to the ring with a tension he hadn't felt since his first major business deal. "Hello." Her voice was bright, curious. "Jessa," Carter said, feeling foolishly relieved just hearing her. "It's Carter from the other night, pizza guy," she teased lightly. "I was starting to think you lost my number. Was trying not to call you at 2 in the morning," he said. "Seemed like bad form." "Points for restraint," she said. "So what's the plan?" "Dinner, obviously, but not just anywhere." He wanted somewhere that would show her she mattered, that this wasn't just a whim. "Are you free tonight?" he asked. There was a beat of silence. "Actually, yeah. My shift ends at 7. "I'll pick you up," he said without thinking. She laughed, a warm, surprised sound. "You don't even know where I work." "Send me the address," he said. "I'll be there." The restaurant he chose wasn't one of the typical flashy places where every table had a celebrity. Instead, it was tucked away in Tribeca, the kind of place where the food mattered more than the name on the door. Private, intimate, quiet enough to hear every word. When Carter pulled up in a sleek black Aston Martin, Jessa was already outside, leaning casually against the brick wall. She wore dark jeans, ankle boots, and a crimson sweater that made her eyes even more vivid under the streetlights. "You clean up well," he said as he stepped out, tossing the valet his keys. "You're not so bad yourself," she replied, her gaze trailing briefly over his tailored navy jacket and open-collared shirt. "No tie tonight." He wanted to feel human, not like a walking title. They slid into a corner booth at the restaurant, candlelight flickering between them. Carter ordered a bottle of wine without glancing at the menu, and when the waiter poured it, Jessa raised an eyebrow. "You're either very confident or very reckless," she said, swirling the deep red liquid in her glass. "Little of both," Carter admitted. "You." "I like when people take chances," she said, tapping her glass against his. "Keeps life interesting." Over grilled sea bass and wild mushroom risotto, they talked, really talked. Not about mergers or business strategies or 5-year plans, but about things Carter hadn't thought about in years. She told him about growing up in Jersey, about her dream of opening a small bakery one day. He listened, fascinated by the passion in her voice when she spoke about creating something of her own. "And you?" she asked, leaning in slightly. "Before the billion-dollar empire, what did you want?" He hesitated, caught off guard. Nobody asked him that anymore. Everyone assumed he always wanted this life. "I wanted to build something that lasted," he said finally. "Something my father couldn't tear apart." Her expression softened, and he realized she understood more than he expected. "You're not your father," she said simply, like it was a truth he needed to hear. The conversation shifted again, lighter now. They debated over the best pizza toppings, argued playfully about classic movies versus indie films. Carter found himself laughing more in one night than he had in years. When the check came, Jessa reached for her purse instinctively. Carter stopped her with a look. "Tonight's on me," he said. "I'm not a charity case, you know," she said, teasing but firm. "I know," he said, his tone serious. "But tonight, let me." After dinner, he walked her to the car, the night crisp and cool around them. She shivered slightly, and without thinking, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "You're going to freeze," she protested, but she pulled it closer anyway. "I'll survive," he said. They stood there for a long moment, the city humming around them. Carter wanted to kiss her, the urge almost overwhelming, but he didn't rush it. He waited, letting the moment stretch, letting her choose. Jessa smiled, something soft and almost shy flickering across her face, and then she rose on her toes and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Carter," she whispered, stepping back. He watched her climb into a cab, the jacket still wrapped around her, and felt a strange, unfamiliar ache in his chest. For once, it wasn't about closing a deal or winning a game. It was about her. And he realized, standing there under the city lights, that he was already in trouble. The following week, Carter found himself distracted in ways he was unaccustomed to. Board meetings blurred into background noise, reports piled up unanswered on his desk. and even the clamor of ringing phones couldn't pull his focus from the memory of Jessa's laugh, or the stubborn tilt of her chin, when she refused to let him pay without protest. On Friday, Carter made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month ago. He cleared his evening calendar. When he called her that afternoon, she answered on the second ring, "Busy tonight." Carter asked, pacing the length of his office, the floor-to-ceiling windows casting long shadows across the plush carpet. "Depends," Jessa said. "Is this another pizza emergency?" "No emergencies," Carter said. I thought you might want to go somewhere different." "I'm intrigued," she said. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just trust me." By 6, he was idling outside her apartment building in Soho, a modest red brick walk-up with ivy crawling up the sides. She emerged a few minutes later, pulling a light denim jacket over a flowing white top and black leggings, her hair cascading loose around her shoulders. When she slid into the passenger seat of the Aston Martin, she looked around and whistled low. "You always pick up your dates in a car that costs more than some houses." "I don't usually pick up dates at all," Carter said without hesitation. She arched an eyebrow but didn't press. Instead, she leaned back in the seat, letting the leather mold around her. "All right, Mr. CEO." "Where are we going?" "You'll see," Carter said, pulling into traffic. The drive took longer than expected thanks to the usual city congestion, but Jessa didn't seem to mind. She spent most of the ride tapping her fingers on the door to the rhythm of the music playing low through the speakers, occasionally teasing him about his painfully serious playlist choices. Finally, they pulled up to an unmarked building tucked away near the waterfront. A valet approached immediately, and Carter tossed him the keys without missing a beat. "This feels suspiciously like a kidnapping," Jessa joked as he offered her his arm. "Only if you say no to dessert," Carter replied, earning a small laugh. Inside, the space opened into a private art gallery, walls lined with vivid canvases and sculptures bathed in soft lighting. A few other guests milled around, glasses of champagne in hand, but it wasn't crowded. "An art gallery," Jessa said, her voice full of amused surprise. "You don't seem like the tortured artist type." "I'm not," Carter said, "but I thought you might like it." For a moment, she just looked at him, something unreadable flickering across her face. Then she slipped her hand into his, her fingers curling naturally around his. They wandered slowly from piece to piece, Jessa's commentary sharp and hilarious. She had opinions about everything, from the absurdity of a sculpture made entirely of crushed soda cans to the pretentiousness of a 7-foot-tall canvas painted entirely black. "You know," she said, stopping in front of a massive abstract piece splashed with chaotic reds and golds, "this one reminds me of you." Carter turned to her, curious. "How's that?" "Looks all polished and controlled from a distance," she said, tilting her head thoughtfully. "But up close, it's a mess of chaos and feeling." He stared at her, stunned silent. Jessa laughed, a little self-conscious. "Sorry, that was probably way too psychoanalytical for a second date." "No," Carter said, his voice rougher than intended. "It was perfect." They moved to a quieter corner of the gallery, where a string quartet played soft music near a makeshift lounge area. Carter ordered them each a glass of champagne, and they settled into a velvet loveseat that overlooked the river through a wall of glass. For a few minutes, they watched the water shimmer under the city lights, the quiet between them comfortable. "So," Jessa said, swirling her champagne lazily, "what does Carter Sullivan do when he's not building empires and kidnapping pizza girls to art galleries?" He smiled faintly. "Honestly, I don't know anymore." She turned to face him fully, setting her glass aside. "That's sad." "Maybe," Carter admitted, "or maybe it's just unfinished." Jessa tucked her legs beneath her on the loveseat, her posture relaxed but her gaze piercing. "You ever think about what you'd do if none of this existed, if you weren't?" She gestured vaguely around them. "This guy." "Sometimes," he said, "but it's hard to imagine a different life when you've spent so long fighting for this one." Jessa reached out, brushing her fingertips lightly over his knuckles. "Maybe you don't have to imagine it. Maybe you just have to decide." Before he could respond, the quartet shifted into a slow, haunting melody. Without thinking, Carter stood and offered her his hand. "Come dance with me," he said. Jessa laughed softly, but she let him pull her to her feet. They moved together in a slow, swaying rhythm, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. For the first time in years, Carter felt the sharp edges inside him soften. "You know," Jessa murmured, her breath warm against his neck, "I think you're dangerous." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Dangerous how? Because," she said, her voice a whisper, "you make me want things I shouldn't." His heart thundered in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Like what?" she smiled, a real, unguarded smile that made something inside him break wide open. "Like believing in fairy tales," she said. Carter tightened his arms around her, anchoring her to him as the music swelled. For once, he didn't think about the next meeting, the next acquisition, the next battle to win. All he thought about was her, and how he never wanted to let her go. Carter leaned against the railing of the rooftop terrace, the cool night air brushing against his face as he watched Jessa explore the skyline view. She wandered slowly, her fingers trailing along the stone balustrade, her hair catching the breeze like a banner. He couldn't remember the last time he had brought anyone up here. This was his quiet place, his retreat when the world's demands became too heavy. And now she was here, fitting into this space as if she had always belonged. "You live in a palace," Jessa said, turning to face him with a wry smile. "Should have guessed from the car and the private art show," Carter chuckled, pushing off the railing and strolling toward her. "I didn't want you to think it mattered." Jessa crossed her arms, tilting her head. "It's not the money, Carter, it's what you do with it." He stopped a few feet away, searching her expression for judgment, but found none, only curiosity. "Then tell me," he said quietly. "What do you see?" She stepped closer, her voice thoughtful. "I see a guy who built walls so high around himself he forgot what it feels like to let anyone in." "And you?" he asked, his voice barely above a murmur. "Would you stay if I let you in?" Jessa's eyes softened. "I'd stay if you wanted me to." The vulnerability in her answer hit him harder than any boardroom betrayal ever had. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from her face, letting his fingertips linger against her skin. "I want you to," he said. The distance between them disappeared as he pulled her into his arms, capturing her mouth in a kiss that was nothing like the polished, calculated moves he employed in business. It was messy and real, and hungry for all the things he didn't know he was missing until now. When they finally pulled apart, Jessa rested her forehead against his, her breathing uneven. "I should warn you," she said, her voice shaky but teasing. "I'm terrible at being someone's perfect girlfriend. I get angry, I say the wrong things. I don't always know when to be quiet." "I don't want perfect," Carter said, tightening his hold on her. "I want real." She laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "Good, because real is all I've got." He kissed her again, slower this time, memorizing the way she tasted, the way she fit against him like the missing piece he hadn't even realized he needed. Later, they sat side by side on a cushioned bench, a heavy blanket draped over their shoulders as the city buzzed below. Carter handed her a steaming mug of coffee, and she accepted it with a grateful sigh. "So," she said, blowing on the surface of the drink, "tell me something nobody else knows." He thought for a long moment before answering. "I wanted to be a pilot when I was a kid. Used to sneak onto rooftops like this and pretend I could fly away." Jessa smiled, her fingers curling around the mug. "You don't seem like the running type." "Maybe not anymore," he said. "But back then I would have given anything for a way out." "You found your way out," she said softly. "You built it." He turned his head, studying her profile in the dim light. "And you, what's your secret?" She hesitated, then said, "I almost left New York once. Right after my mom passed, I packed a bag, bought a bus ticket, but when I got to the station, I couldn't do it. I realized I wasn't running from the city. I was running from feeling alone." "You're not alone now," Carter said with quiet conviction. Jessa blinked rapidly, and he could see the battle in her eyes, the years of learning not to trust promises, the instinct to protect herself. But then she set her coffee aside and turned fully toward him, pulling the blanket tighter around them both. "No," she said, "I'm not." The evening stretched on, filled with lazy conversation and easy silences that felt more intimate than anything Carter had ever experienced. It wasn't the rooftop, the view, or even the luxury surrounding them that made the night unforgettable. It was her. By the time he walked her downstairs to the waiting car he had arranged, the city was starting to fade into dawn. Pale streaks of lavender and gold painted the sky, and Carter realized he didn't want her to leave. Neither did Jessa, if the way she lingered by the car door was any indication. "I had no idea," she said, her voice low. "About what? That ordering pizza would lead to this." He laughed, resting his forehead against hers. "Neither did I." She kissed him quick and sweet before slipping into the car. Carter watched it pull away, his heart lodged somewhere in his throat. Inside the penthouse, he paced the living room, restless with an energy he couldn't contain. He had spent his whole life chasing success, but for the first time he realized he had been chasing the wrong thing. He needed her. Without allowing himself to second-guess, Carter grabbed his jacket, stormed downstairs, and slid into his car. He knew where she lived. He had dropped her off enough times to memorize the route without thinking. When he arrived outside her building, he didn't hesitate. He buzzed her apartment until her sleepy voice came over the intercom. "Carter," she asked, sounding confused. "I can't do this halfway," he said, the words tumbling out. "I want you in my life, in every way." There was a pause long enough for his heart to hammer painfully against his ribs, then the door buzzed open. He took the stairs 2 at a time, and when she opened her apartment door, her hair a tangled halo around her face and wearing an oversized sweatshirt, she looked at him like he had just handed her the world. "You're insane," she said, laughing through the tears in her eyes. "Completely," Carter said, pulling her into his arms, "but I'm yours if you'll have me." She buried her face in his chest, her arms locking tightly around his waist. "About damn time." They kissed in the doorway, the city waking up around them, but here in this tiny pocket of the world, time stood still. Carter had built corporations, won battles, conquered markets, but none of it compared to this. None of it compared to winning her heart. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Jessa's small apartment, painting golden bands across the worn wooden floors. Carter sat on the edge of her couch, his elbows resting on his knees, watching her bustle around the tiny kitchen. She was humming under her breath, barefoot and still wearing the sweatshirt from last night, and Carter couldn't tear his eyes away. Jessa caught him staring and grinned. "You're going to make me burn your breakfast if you keep looking at me like that." "I'll survive," Carter said, leaning back against the cushions. "Besides, I'm not hungry for food." She tossed a dish towel at him, laughing when he caught it easily. "Flattery will get you nowhere." "That's a shame," he said, tossing the towel onto the counter. "I was hoping it'd get me everywhere." Jessa shook her head, still smiling, and flipped the pancakes with a practiced flick of her wrist. "You're impossible." "And yet here I am," he said, standing and walking toward her. "Still here, not running, not hiding." She set the spatula down and turned to face him, her expression turning serious. "Are you sure you're ready for this? For everything?" Carter didn't hesitate. "I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything." Jessa searched his face, looking for any trace of doubt. Finding none, she reached up and touched his jaw, her thumb brushing lightly over his cheekbone. "You're really not what I expected," she said softly. "Neither are you," Carter said. "You're better." They ate breakfast together at the tiny kitchen table, legs tangled beneath it, laughter spilling easily between them. It felt natural, anchored and real in a way Carter had never experienced before. Afterward, they walked through the city together, hand in hand, blending into the weekend crowds. Carter had worn a simple gray hoodie and jeans, and for once, nobody recognized him. He liked it that way. He liked being just a man with the woman he loved, not a headline or a stock price. They stopped at a street market, where Jessa dragged him from booth to booth, examining everything from handmade soaps to vintage records. She bartered good-naturedly with an elderly vendor over a battered leather-bound journal, finally winning it for half the asking price. She turned to Carter, holding the journal triumphantly. "For your pilot dreams, in case you ever want to write about them." He took it from her, feeling something knot tightly in his chest. She remembered. She saw him, not just the polished exterior everyone else catered to, but the messy, dreaming boy he had once been. "I love you," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Jessa froze, the crowd milling around them unnoticed. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "You don't have to say it back," Carter said quickly. "I just needed you to know." Jessa stared at him for a long, breathless moment. Then she dropped her bag onto the ground and threw her arms around his neck, her mouth finding his in a kiss so fierce and joyful it drew a few whistles from the nearby vendors. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "So much it terrifies me." He kissed her again, laughing into her mouth, feeling lighter than he had in years. That night, Carter took Jessa to the Sullivan Tower, but not to the gleaming conference rooms or the sleek offices. Instead, he led her to the rooftop, where a private dinner waited under a canopy of fairy lights. A string quartet played softly in the background, and a table was set with crystal glasses and silver cutlery overlooking the glittering skyline. Jessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You did all this. For me, for us," Carter said, pulling her close. "I want you to know exactly where you belong." They ate under the stars, trading kisses between courses, stealing glances that spoke of promises and futures slowly unfolding. When dessert arrived, Carter stood, reaching into his jacket pocket. He dropped to one knee, and Jessa's hands flew to her mouth again, her eyes wide with shock. "I know we haven't done this the traditional way," Carter said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "But I don't want to waste another second pretending I'm not completely, hopelessly, madly in love with you. Marry me, Jessa Walters. Build a life with me, be my family." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to form words. He slid the ring onto her finger, a delicate band with a simple, stunning diamond, and stood, lifting her into his arms as the city roared quietly around them. "I guess this means I have to start practicing my Mrs. Sullivan signature," she said between laughing sobs. "You have a lifetime to get it right," Carter said, kissing her forehead. They married 3 months later in a small ceremony on a private beach, far from the prying eyes of the world. Jessa wore a simple lace gown, her hair loose around her shoulders, and Carter wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up and bare feet in the sand. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Carter lifted Jessa into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. Later, at the reception under a canopy of stars, Jessa pulled Carter aside, away from the clinking glasses and cheerful music. "You know," she said, tracing the buttons of his shirt with her fingers, "this isn't the life I thought I'd have." "Regrets?" Carter asked, pretending to be serious. "Not a single one," she said, rising onto her toes to kiss him. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly against him as the ocean whispered nearby. "You're my greatest adventure," he whispered into her hair. "And you," she said, leaning back to meet his gaze, "are my home." Years later, they stood on the rooftop of their Manhattan penthouse, not the old one Carter used for business, but a new home, filled with light and laughter and the scent of home-cooked meals. Jessa leaned against the railing, a small bump beginning to show beneath her sundress, while Carter stood behind her, his hands resting gently on her stomach. "Think they'll have your stubbornness or mine?" Jessa teased. "God help them if it's both," Carter said, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. They watched the sun set over the city that had once been nothing but a battleground and now was a witness to their beginning, their middle, and every beautiful, messy, imperfect moment still to come. Together. Forever.